Every dog alive today exists because of a competition it never fought. 40 million years ago, the first dogs evolved in North America. Over time, they split into three major groups, and the most powerful of those groups produced something extraordinary. A canid the size of a bear. A predator with the skull of a lion and jaws that could crack open bone and digest it whole. Its name was Epicyon. At 170 kilograms, it was the largest dog that has ever walked the earth. But Epicyon is gone. Every single member of its entire subfamily is gone. And the dogs that survived, the ones that became wolves, foxes, and golden retrievers, survived not because they were the strongest, but because they were nothing like Epicyon. What killed the most terrifying dog that ever lived was not a bigger predator, not a catastrophe, not the cold. It was cats. Epicyon belonged to a subfamily of dogs called the Borophaginae. The name means bone-crushing dogs. Over the course of their 30-million-year history, they became one of the most successful groups of predators North America has ever seen. There were more than 60 species of Borophaginae. Every single one of them was endemic to North America. None have been found anywhere else on Earth. At their peak, they dominated ecosystems across the entire continent, from the forests of the east to the open plains of the west. But they did not start out as giants. The earliest Borophaginae appeared roughly 34 million years ago during the Oligocene, and they looked nothing like Epicyon. Genera like Archaeocyon and Oxycyon were no larger than a modern fox. They were slow, flat-footed, walking on the full sole of the foot in what is known as a plantigrade posture, the same way bears walk today. They were omnivores, not apex predators, and they occupied a world that was still dominated by an older, more primitive family of dogs called the Hesperocyonini. But the Borophaginae were evolving. Over millions of years, they grew larger and shifted toward meat. Their teeth became more robust and their jaws became more powerful. As they changed, the Hesperocyonini began to disappear. This was not a coincidence. The Borophaginae were outcompeting them, filling the same ecological roles, but doing it better, faster, and at larger body sizes. By around 15 million years ago, the Hesperocyonini were gone entirely, and the Borophaginae had taken over as the dominant canids on the continent. It was from this foundation that Epicyon emerged. There were three recognized species. Epicyon savus and Epicyon orodontoides were both impressive animals, comparable in size to a modern gray wolf. But the largest of the three, Epicyon haydeni, was something else entirely. At 2.4 meters long, 90 centimeters at the shoulder, and an average weight of 100 to 125 kilograms, it was the size of a brown bear, the largest known specimen, estimated from a single massive humerus bone, may have weighed as much as 170 kilograms. That made it longer than a modern male African lion and comparable in weight. No dog before or since has ever come close. Epicyon haydeni and Epicyon savus lived alongside each other for millions of years, across much of the same range, and they maintained a consistent size difference of 16 to 23% at every site where their fossils overlap. Both species also trended toward larger body sizes over time in a case of parallel evolution, growing bigger together while staying proportionally apart. Some researchers questioned whether they might actually be the same species, just males and females. But that theory was rejected. No living canid shows that level of sexual dimorphism. Subtle but consistent differences in tooth shape and skull proportions confirmed they were two distinct species occupying slightly different ecological roles within the same ecosystems. What made Epicyon so dangerous was not just its size. It was the way its entire body was engineered to kill and consume in ways no living dog can. Start with the skull. Epicyon did not. Its skull was short, broad, and domed, shaped far more like a lion's than a wolf's. This was not cosmetic. A shorter snout brings the canine teeth closer to the jaw joint, which is the fulcrum of the bite. The closer the bite is to the fulcrum, the more force it generates. It is the same principle that makes the short-faced bear's bite so devastating. In Epicyon, it produced a bite stronger than any canid living today. But the canines were only part of the system. Behind them sat a set of massive cheek teeth called carnassials. In most dogs, carnassials are blade-like, designed to shear through meat. In Epicyon, they were broader, more robust, built like crushing platforms. When the upper and lower carnassials locked together, they created a surface capable of cracking open large leg bones, skulls, and everything in between. Behind the carnassials, its molars were wide and grindstone-like, suggesting it may have also consumed plant material and insects on occasion, though the majority of its diet was meat. Epicyon was a hypercarnivore, meaning more than 70% of what it ate was animal tissue. The wear patterns on its teeth tell the rest of the story. They closely match the kind of damage seen on the teeth of modern hyenas, another bone-crushing specialist. Fossilized feces, attributed to Epicyon, have been found containing fragments of bone, confirming that this animal was not only capable of crushing and swallowing bone, but digesting it too. This gave Epicyon access to something most predators left behind. Bone marrow is one of the most calorie-dense substances in a carcass. While other carnivores in Miocene North America walked away from a skeleton, Epicyon could crack it open and extract every last nutrient. Below the skull, the rest of the body followed a different logic. Epicyon had a digitigrade posture, meaning it walked and ran on its toes, with the rest of the foot lifted off the ground, just like modern dogs and wolves. It also had small collarbones and a flexible back, both adaptations that increase stride length and allow for efficient running. These features suggest Epicyon was built to move and likely hunted in open environments rather than dense forests. But its size worked against it. At over 100 kilograms, it could not sustain the long-distance pursuit that modern wolves are famous for. Studies of its limb proportions show it was less cursorial than both modern wolves and hyenas, though more so than earlier, more primitive borophagines. Epicyon was fast, but not for long. It relied on short, explosive bursts of speed to close the distance on its prey. And once it got there, that skull did the rest. So what was Epicyon actually hunting, and how was it doing it? The answer to the first question is almost anything it wanted. Miocene North America was a world of giants, and Epicyon lived alongside prey species that would seem alien today. Herds of epicamelas, a camel that stood 3 meters tall on stilted legs, moved across the open plains. Teleoceras, a rhinoceros, built like a hippopotamus, grazed in land-river systems across the continent. There were prehistoric horses, pronghorns, and other large herbivores spread across an increasingly grassland-dominated landscape. Epicyon sat at the top of this food web, and based on its size and jaw strength, it was capable of taking down animals far larger than itself. The answer to the second question is far less clear. How Epicyon actually hunted is one of the most debated topics in paleontology, and the answer changes depending on which part of the skeleton you study. Researchers who examined its elbow joint morphology concluded that Epicyon had reverted to an ambush-like hunting style, more comparable to a big cat than a pursuit predator. A separate study of its bony labyrinth, the structure of the inner ear that governs balance and agility, suggested it was a pounce predator, launching itself at prey from short range. And yet another analysis of its forelimb proportions pointed toward pursuit or pounce pursuit predation, something between a wolf and a lion with no clean modern equivalent. The truth is that Epicyon's predatory behavior does not map neatly onto any living species. It was something in between, something that no longer exists. Whether it hunted alone or in groups is equally uncertain. Some researchers have pointed to the size of the prefrontal cortex in canids as evidence for social behavior, since larger canids tend to have more developed prefrontal regions and more complex social structures. Others have argued that Epicyon must have been a pack hunter. Their forelimbs are not built for grappling the way big cats are, so the only way to take down a 3-meter camel is with numbers, and the fossil record supports this to a degree. Epicyon was one of the most common large carnivores in North America during the late Miocene. Its fossils are abundant and widespread, which at least suggests it was not a rare solitary animal. But not everyone agrees. Other researchers have noted that Epicyon's overall build, its skull shape, its limb proportions, and its ambush-like elbow morphology resemble solitary big cats far more than packing wolves. Using modern canines as a behavioral model for borophagines may simply be the wrong comparison. Epicyon may have been something we have never seen before, a dog that lived like a cat. For roughly 7 million years, Epicyon was one of the most dominant predators on the North American continent. And then it was gone. Not because of a volcanic eruption, not because of an ice age, not because something bigger came along. Epicyon and the entire Borophaginae subfamily were ultimately undone by an animal that most of them had never encountered before: cats. The family Felidae first evolved in Eurasia around 33 million years ago, but for a long time, they stayed there. North America actually went through an extended period with no cat-like predators at all. A window, sometimes referred to as the cat gap, may have lasted over 7 million years. During this time, borophagines were free to expand into ecological roles that on other continents would have been filled by felines. They became ambush predators. They developed the ability to rotate their palms upward for grappling prey. They filled the niche of the solitary, powerful, short-range killer. In the absence of cats, the bone-crushing dogs became the closest thing North America had to them. But then, the real thing showed up. Around 20 million years ago, felids began migrating into North America from Eurasia, across the land bridge that once connected modern Russia and Alaska. The first to arrive was Sudurus, a relatively small and unspecialized cat. For several million years, the newcomers struggled to gain a foothold, but once they did, everything changed. These cats were not just filling the same niches as the borophagines. They were better at it. They had retractable claws that stayed razor-sharp because they were not worn down by contact with the ground. They had powerful, flexible forelimbs built for grappling and pulling down large prey. In time, some of them evolved elongated canine teeth capable of puncturing the throat of almost anything they could catch. A study analyzing more than 2,000 North American carnivore fossils concluded that the decline of borophagines was not passive replacement, where one group fades and another fills the gap. It was active displacement. the cats directly outcompeted the bone-crushing dogs in niche after niche, and the Borophagines had no answer for it. But here is the part of the story that matters most. The cats did not wipe out all dogs, only the ones that were trying to be cats. The Borophagines, with their ambush hunting, their grappling forelimbs, and their solitary predatory lifestyles, were the dogs most ecologically similar to felids, and they were the ones that lost. The other subfamily of dogs, the canids, survived. These were the smaller, lighter, endurance-built runners that had specialized into long-distance pursuit hunting, a niche that cats had no interest in competing for. By around 8 million years ago, canines had crossed into Eurasia and begun spreading across the world. They would eventually evolve into the 37 species of wild canids alive today. Epicyon disappeared from the fossil record around 5 to 6 million years ago, but the Borophagines did not vanish with it. One genus, Borophaginae, held on for millions of years longer, surviving until roughly 2 million years ago in the early Pleistocene. That means the last of the bone-crushing dogs lived long enough to see the beginning of the Ice Age and the arrival of cold-adapted megafauna, like mammoths and saber-toothed cats. But even Borophaginae could not hold on forever. Outcompeted, outmatched, and increasingly confined to shrinking niches, the last Borophaginae eventually died. And with it, an entire 30 million year lineage came to an end. What survived was the opposite of everything Borophaginae had been. Not the biggest, not the strongest, not the bone crushers or the ambush killers. The dogs that made it through were lean, fast, and built to run for hours without stopping. They hunted in coordinated packs across open ground, chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They were the ancestors of wolves, foxes, coyotes, and jackals. And eventually, one branch of that surviving lineage would form a bond with another species of endurance predator, humans, and become something Borophaginae never could have. The most terrifying dog that ever lived ruled a continent for 7 million years. It crushed bone, competed with bears, and hunted prey the size of rhinos. But in the end, it was not strength or size that determined which dogs would inherit the earth. It was the willingness to become something else entirely.